Well, hello there, humans and earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and I hope you're lucky enough to be doing it too. I'm Bushcon Blitz, and I'm back with a look at what is a very, very old tank. This is the IS-3. This is really the original super tank at Tier 3. This is the tank that used to absolutely do the business in no uncertain terms, and was widely regarded as the strongest Tier 8 heavy in its day. And days have changed. It seems now that this tank is more the basis for a whole bunch of other heavies. Now, rest assured, there are a lot of heavy tanks at Tier 8. There's a lot of good heavy tanks at Tier 8, and there's a lot of diversity at Tier 8 and heavy tanks. In fact, there are nearly 20 heavy tanks. There are 19 heavy tanks available at Tier 8 in various guises. Some of them you can't get in game very easily, others have been limited editions, all kinds of things, but they're there. Don't worry about that. And there is a specific set of heavy tanks at Tier 8 that are based around this tank. Well, this is the first one. And they run 122mm guns. There's the Glacial, the 112, the IS-6 and the IS-6 Fearless, the IS-3 Defender, the IS-5, the Object 740. You can even include, at a stretch, the IS-2 SH. I won't. But you get the idea. They're very, very similar tanks. And the IS-3 is still a very good tank. Because all those tanks, in my opinion, are very good tanks. And they have slightly different variations on a theme, and they can be good, they can be bad. But what the IS-3 has always been very good at is knife fighting and brawling. And that is where you basically get in close and nasty, and you use a strong armor profile and a big Peekaboom Alpha 122mm, and you cause people a whole lot of hurt, a whole lot of angst, and you rush them and pressure them. It's not a sniper, it's not a finesse tank, it's just an all guts and glory Soviet brawling machine. It has a pike nose. Now, the pike nose is a particularly peculiar piece of armor in that it works best when pointing directly at the enemy, as opposed to most tanks, which work best when slightly angled, which increases their effective armor. When you angle the pike nose, it goes flat, and that means it's very, very easy to pen. You lower your armor profile. It's also got spaced armor on the sides, which means it's very much impervious to heat or HE into the side of the tank, which is great news at the moment. There's a bit of an event going on with a T-49 rocket launcher running around, and it doesn't really like the IS-3 much at all. It's not as strong armor-wise as it once was, for lack of a better term, and it's an overused term, but it has been power creeped out of the game a little bit. And I'll get to exactly what it does well and what it does poorly in just a wee bit. But what you need to understand is whatever the outcome of this review for you, the player, I think the tank is still very much firmly in the positive side of the ledger, and is still a very good vehicle. I don't think it's as strong as it once was, because the tanks that compete against it have got better. Now, there is something that needs to be said straight away. The armor profile is still solid, but it is not as strong as it once was, as other tanks have improved. Let's have a look at the IS-5. Now, I'm including the contemporaries of this tank. The tanks, I think, are really good. This is taken from the perspective of the T-32. You can see the IS-5 there, absolutely impervious at front. The IS-6 can angle and jerk around and becomes much tougher armor-wise. The T-32 has 197mm of pen, so you can see, just with AP rounds, it's tough. The IS-3 Defender is a joke. It has 193 as a starting point, but there are 220mm of pen required for those two red bits in the center. It's a much tougher armor profile. And you can see the IS-3 has, well, its pike nose isn't as strong as either of the Defenders or the IS-5. In fact, it's quite a bit weaker, although its lower glacis does have a nice cool angle. What it has going for it is the turret is pretty strong. For a tank with a good armor profile, it's pretty mobile. And it has stronger side armor, say, than the Glacial 112, which is much stronger upper glacis-wise, but has a weaker lower glacis and not such a strong armor profile underneath and on the sides. So let's talk less about the armor, which is still good, but not the best. It's still competitive, but not the best. Let's talk about the mobility. And this is important because the IS-3 brings a fairly good package to the game in terms of mobility. While its been power creeped a little because there's a lot of tanks now at tier 8 that are fairly mobile. It still moves around the battlefield very handily. You have 38 kilometers an hour as your top speed, and you've got a horsepower to weight ratio of 15.8, which of those comparable tanks is actually good. I mean, you're better than the Glacial, you're better than the IS-6, you're better than the IS-3 Defender, and you're nearly exactly the same as the IS-5. So then you look at the soft stats, the hidden stats. What about the terrain resistance stats? Now, your terrain resistance stats are the ratings for soft, hard, soft, and heavy ground. And the lower the coefficient, the better. So on hard ground, you have 1. On medium ground, you have 1.4 as a coefficient. And on heavy, like swampy terrain, you get 2. Well, that's also very good. That's better than the IS-3 Defenders again. Apart from your medium grounds, you got better. You're much of a muchness with. Actually, you're a wash with the IS-3 Defender. You are better on 2 forms than the IS-6, but worse on the soft terrain. You're exactly the same as the Glacial, and you're better than the IS-5 on 2 out of the 3. So you can see mobility-wise, you're pretty bloody good as well. In terms of traverse, you still have the best traverse of any of those tanks. Your no mod traverse, as in your traverse numbers before anything gets done to it, is 30 degrees. That's really good. The Glacial has 28, but all the others have 26 degrees. In fact, 30 degrees as a base traverse is a really good number. So it's still very much the same tank it's always been. It is an excellent tank for running around in and brawling, and not so good at the sniping. But if we're looking again at comparative peer-to-peer testing versus the tanks that have the same kind of armor profile and such, well, its gun's actually better than the rest. It's 0.362 dispersion. And the reason I'm testing it out against these particular tanks, like the Glacial, the IS-5, the Defender, the IS-6, the Object IS, these are the tanks of a particular style and type. And it's at a tier where there are all kind of different heavy tanks. There's Heaviums, there's hull-down monsters like that T-34. There's the Carnarvon, which is like all about the gun. And then there's, these kind of tanks in particular, which are very different again. And it's much easier to compare apples with apples. Now, it's a tech tree tank, which means it doesn't get the cash that the others do, which is unfortunate. But it does actually have better mobility, and it's got better accuracy on its weapon than those brawlers. 0.362 is your best dispersion. Second place on that is the Defender at 0.381. So you can see you've got a leg up on that. And your aim time, well, your aim time is pretty lousy. It's actually the worst out of any of those tanks. So you're looking at a trade-off there. And again, it lends itself to what all these tanks seem to do very well, which is brawling in close and being a sneaky bugger. Now, you've heard me say it often enough if you've been watching the channel for a while that the best armor is not being seen at all. And the IS-3 excels in that. It can hide under the crevices and the cracks and get below berms and make it very, very tough for other tanks to actually get good shots at it. And that means that you are more likely to stay alive longer and you're more likely to be able to put yourself to the good and do good things. And that spaced armor on the side cannot be overstated. It will save you an awful lot of heartache from heat firing guns. And that is something else that the IS-3 has in its favour. It has an APCR round on its BL-9. Now, the BL-9 used to be the byword in heavy tank guns, and it's still very, very good. The penetration numbers on your APCR are 265. Now, why is that better than all the other tanks that I've listed previously? It's because APCR doesn't have to worry about spaced armor and, tracks the way that heat rounds do. And that's a real plus for this tank. So you've got a good gun with 225mm of pen on your AP rounds, which is the best, again, out of all the comparative tanks. You've got an APCR premium ammunition round, which, again, is the best out of all the comparable tanks, in my opinion. You have about the same rate of fire. They're all between 4.7 and 5.09. None of them are really taking the chocolate rations with that. You're very, very mobile. You've got spaced armor on the sides, which some of them do, others don't. And you're very, very low to the ground. Your top end speed is 38 kilometers an hour, which is very, very good. Your horsepower to weight ratio and your terrain resistance stats are more than competitive with the rest of the team. And you have the best no mod traverse of any of them. So why do I think it's been power creeped out a little? Well, it's not that it's not as effective. It's not that at all. It's the fact that now there are a lot of other options at this tier, and there are a lot of really good tanks at this tier. And I guess this should be a review. It shouldn't just be a nostalgia trip for me, but I just want to say that this tank was once the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and now it's more the Velociraptor. It's still very competitive. It's still an excellent vehicle. It's just not the best anymore. And I like that. The game should change. The nuance should change. But something that hasn't changed, in fact, which has been a little bit of an anachronism, is that this game now seems to be more skewed towards heavy tanks, or at least heavy tanks are now more valuable than they were for quite some time. And there's a reason for this. The penetration changes, the fact that premium ammunition now does a lower amount of damage when it pens, means that being able to pen with your standard rounds is more valuable. And the IS-3 has very, very good standard ammunition pen, and it has a fairly tough armor profile for a lot of the tanks it comes up against. Now, it used to feast, it used to see +2, -2 matchmaking, so it would see tier 6, but it had to deal with tier 10. Nowadays, you really only see tier 9 and tier 7, and there are a lot of tier 7 tanks that used to be able to switch to premium ammunition, light tanks included in this in a big way, and medium tanks in a big way, and could then just burn you down with damage per minute. Whereas the IS-3, its armor was mitigated by that, and that's no longer the case. If they want to burn you at DPM now, they have to really do it with standard AP, and your armor can certainly stand up to that kind of punishment. And the mobility on this tank, for me, is such that you can keep track of most of the light tanks when they try and COD you. You have the ability to negate heat from a tank like the Type 62 Dragon if they're going around you. And you just overall a very, very mean and aggressive package. And it's a form of gameplay and thoughtful gameplay that's available to you in the IS-3 that isn't always available to you in all the other heavies. It's a utility kind of tank too, because it does do very well in a lot of situations. It has a very, very weak area of armor above the turret. It's about 60mm, so you've got to watch out for that if you are hull down. Never stop moving. And your pike nose will not stop anything like 200mm reliably. So tier 8 tanks should be able to go through you pretty handily. But a lot of tier 7s are going to struggle, and a lot of light and medium tanks who have lower pens tend to average around about 150 to 160mm a pen on your tier 7 mediums and lights. They're not going to be able to do the business at all compared to you. And the BL-10 still barks a very, very big bark for a very, very big dog. So the IS-3, as a current tank in the current meta, is it good? Absolutely. Is it worth getting? Absolutely. Is it a tank I would recommend as a tank that can carry? Absolutely. Is it as strong as it once was? No. Is that a good thing? I think that's a very good thing. I think the fact that penetration and armor has become good and things that work in the game is even more important than I thought it would be. The idea that a tank that has good penetration numbers on its AP rounds should be rewarded for having good penetration numbers on its AP rounds would seem to be self-evident, but it's a thing a lot of people missed. And that means you get true DPM on a tank with good pen, and you get limited DPM on a tank that doesn't have good pen. So, good armor, good pen, mobile, what's not to like? Lots more coming up on the channel, guys. Make sure you stick around. There's going to be a patron count-in stream later in the week. I'm going to do another stream tomorrow, I think. I don't know what it's going to be about, but it'll be a bit of giggle and a bit of fun. And hopefully we can get some guests on that one as well. That was the IS-3. I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of driving from the front there, which got us the Mastery badge. No spotted damage at all. I'm Bushcon Blitz. Look after your families and stay safe on the battlefield.